Hello and welcome back to my Dandelion Diaries. Today we are going to be continuing my fountain pens for beginners series, and we are now on episode 4. So if you missed episode 1, all about pens, episode 2, all about ink, or episode 3, all about paper, be sure to check those out in the playlist that is dedicated for this series. But for today, like I said, we're going to be going through maintenance. And I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges for anybody who's trying to get into the fountain pen hobby, maybe is interested in using their first fountain pen and is a little nervous or unsure. And today I want to try to cover all of the basics that kind of helped me as a beginner when I first started using fountain pens and helped me overcome the barrier of, I'm not going to break the pen I just bought kind of situation. I am going to be using 4 example pens today, and they are all beginner friendly. This is a Jinhao 82, this is a Scrix 419, this is a 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗍, and this is a Pilot Kakuno. I am going to be disassembling all 4 of these pens, and then I'm also going to be talking about cleaning pens today, pen like repairs in a way, and then also a little bit about nibs, because I feel like nibs is a big thing when it comes to fountain pens, especially as you get farther along in the hobby. But let me go ahead and zoom in, and I'm going to start by taking apart the pens themselves and show you guys the components at their basic forms. So beginning here, I'm going to start with the Pilot Kakuno. This is probably the most beginner-friendly fountain pen that I would recommend right now, unless you wanted to get a platinum preppy, but this is probably my preferred because you get a little bit more of an experience with it. So this is the cap here. It comes off in just a popping snap cap, which is really user-friendly. And then the other parts of this pen are very easy to disassemble as well. You can just unscrew the grip section here from the barrel. The barrel comes off, and then you also have a converter in here, or a cartridge. This is a empty cartridge, which I'm going to show you guys how to clean these out today too. And then here you have the grip section with the nib unit and feed. So I'm actually going to take the nib and the feed out. You can just simply pull gently out. If you cannot get this out with just 2 fingers and a small tug, do not force it, okay? This is a huge thing. Whenever you are disassembling a pen, you never want to force any of the components, especially if they are made of plastic. They will snap, they will break, and you probably won't be able to use your pen anymore. So once again, I'm just going to gently stick this back in, and I'm going to gently pull it back out. You can do a little twisting motion if you want, just to give it a little extra push, but you really should be applying very minimal force to get this out. If you're having to really struggle to pull this, it's likely not meant to be disassembled from the pen. In the Kakuno's point here, it is meant to be disassembled from the pen. So here we have that grip section, and here we have the feed, and then here we have the nib. One thing I like about the Pilot Kakunos is on the feed itself, when you put the nib back on, it has a nice little place for the feed to, or the nib to rest, so you're not guessing of where it's meant to go on the feed once you've disassembled the pen. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this pen. This is your standard, what I call a cartridge converter filler pen. These are very common, very easy to work with. And on a beginner standpoint, I think this is a really great start. However, I do think the next pen I'm going to talk about, which is the 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗍𝗍, is even more beginner friendly when it comes to disassembly because it is a piston filler. So all the piston filler means is that when I turn this knob, you're going to see, maybe, there we go, the plunger here go up and down with the piston turn that I'm doing right now. So this is essentially emptying out whatever's in this cavity in here, and then it is refilling it when I turn it the other way. I'm going to go ahead and take the cap off just so we can watch it a little bit smoother. It'll go all the way up to the very top here, and then it will also unscrew all the way down here. Piston fillers are great, especially this 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗍𝗍 for beginners, because it holds a lot of ink. So when you're getting started, you may not be wanting to, change your ink all the time or experiment with different colors. You just maybe be set on, I want a black ink and a good writing pen, and this holds plenty of ink and will last you quite a while before you'd have to refill it. The rest of the way to disassemble the 𝗬𝘗 is to, again, pull the nib and feed out. They actually do not recommend this on the 𝗬𝘗 website because it can cause cracks here at the tip of the nib section, the grip section, sorry. But I've never had any problems with this, again, because I go slow. I'm not forcing anything into place. I've personally never had any issues with that, but if you were to have issues, definitely contact 𝗬𝘗 and see what they would be able to do for you. You can also completely disassemble this back part here to clean and re-oil the piston. I'm not going to be doing that in this video because I feel like that's pretty advanced. It's not super a beginner thing, so I'm not going to be doing that here, but you can completely disassemble this part as well to re-oil the piston, which I am going to talk about later, but again, not disassembling completely here. So that is it for the 𝗬𝘗 Eco. Another piston filler is that 𝗬𝘁 419, and I specifically want to talk about this one today because it is very dirty and I want to show you guys how I'm going to try to clean it. But this one is, again, a piston filler, so you're going to turn the knob here at the back. This one is much less smooth, so I feel like this is going to need a little bit of grease in here at some point, and then it also is a little bit more challenging to disassemble because you don't pull straight out on this one, you screw. And the turns on this pen are very tight and creaky, and that's just the make of this pen. But if you can probably see here, I want to clean this pen because it is full of shimmer. So I want to see if we can do this on camera together. If not, I will show you guys what I plan to do, even if I can't do it on camera. So that is the 𝗬𝘁 419. It's pretty simple to disassemble, again, because it is a piston filler. You're only removing the nib and feed section, but it is obviously clogged with glitter, so we're going to be cleaning this. And then the last pen that I'm going to be disassembling is that 𝗬𝗏 82, like I mentioned, and these bad boys are really fun for beginners because they are very, very disassembly, very easily to disassemble, and they have lots of parts that disassemble. So if you like to, you know, play a lot with colors or maybe changing the look of your pen often, I think these are great options because you can take the finials off. You can even change out the trims if you wanted to. They are entirely customizable. Like, both ends of the finials come off. There's the little ring, so you could, if you had a silver one and a gold one, you could even do two-toned gold silver. The grip section comes off here like this, and then this is a converter, so it's going to twist like a piston, but it's inside, and it's inside the little cartridge converter hole. And then this also comes out as a nib. And I want to specifically talk about the 𝗬𝗏 nib disassembly because it can disassemble in two ways. So here we have just the grip section with the nib. I can pull this straight out, or I can turn, and it has a nib feed housing. Is this still wet? No. And then after that, I can also take it out of this. So I don't know if it's meant to do that, but all of my 𝗬𝗏s do this. So this is also another way a pen could disassemble. Again, whenever you are disassembling a pen, no matter what it is that you are disassembling, just go slow. Do not force any of the pieces together, and definitely do not, I guess, twist or pull if you're not sure. Like, I'd probably research whatever pen you're using and then go from there. Also, I want to point out, before I put the nib back in here, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but there is a very slight indent inside the hole here to show where the nib is supposed to sit. So I'm trying to line it up on camera while not looking at it at the same time. It's a little challenging, but once it fits in the hole correctly, it will slip in very easily. I did not force it or anything, so just if you have a nib section that has this, be sure you're careful when pushing the nib and feed in. Again, go slow, go gently, don't break any of the plastic pieces. Okay, I think that's it for disassembly purposes. If you were to clean any of these pens, you could disassemble them like I just did and just clean each piece individually with some distilled water. Or you could try to clean them still kind of put together. Naturally, to clean a pen, you are going to have to take the cap off. Otherwise, how are you going to get to the feed and nib? I feel like that's kind of a given. And then you don't necessarily need to clean the barrel because there should not be any ink in this in a cartridge converter pen. But if you didn't want to, let's say, take the nib and feed out, you could stick the tip of this into water and then twist this up and down until this fills up with clear water, meaning that the cartridge itself or converter itself and the nib and feed are clear and only water is coming through. Usually doing it this way takes lots of different flushes. And if you have very stubborn ink, you will have to get something called pen flush or get a little creative with your cleaning methods. But I'll just move on into cleaning for the rest of these pens, and we'll talk a bit about cleaning supplies. So naturally, when you're going to clean a pen, it's going to be full of ink. It's not going to be clean like these pens. It will look something like this. It'll have ink inside of it, and you will have to disassemble the pen and clean all of the pieces until it comes clear. The risk of not cleaning your pen is it can degrade the parts of the pen depending on what the ink is made out of. It can make it very clogged, meaning you will take a lot more effort to clean the pen, or just overall not a fun writing experience because you're not going to have nice consistent flow of ink through the pen in general. That being said, you want to be sure you're cleaning your fountain pens, especially as a beginner, probably at least, I would say, once a month. So if you have a pen and it is full of ink, like this one, and let's say I haven't written with this pen for over a month and there's still ink in here, go ahead and clean it out. I know it hurts to probably throw away the ink, but it's either the ink or the pen, and the amount of ink likely in the pen is not going to be substantial enough of a price point to risk damaging your pen. You could, if you also like to paint or draw with inks, get a empty fountain pen jar or fountain pen bottle, or just a separate jar if you have it, and empty the ink into something like this, and you can have a hodgepodge of colors and paint with them instead of re-inking them back into pens. Which I also should mention, you should never take ink out of a pen and then re-ink it back up into a different pen or return that ink to its bottle. Contamination of ink can cause a lot of problems across the board: mold, fungus, there's consistency issues within the ink. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody getting like sick or having any kind of ailment from a bad ink, but it does ruin the ink and you will not be able to use it anymore. Usually if you have mold in your ink, it's going to be kind of gloopy, it's going to have chunks, it will not look normal. It just won't look normal. So every time you clean a pen, if you're emptying the ink into another container, or if you're emptying the ink out in general, make sure it is in a separate container, not returning to the original bottle or even your original sample file. I would definitely discard the ink or put it in something separately to use, not in a pen. I do like to paint with some of my discard. Here is a sample file full of discard ink that I have. Sometimes you can get some really fun colors this way. So just take what you will and do what you want. Just don't put old ink back into original file. Okay, I'll get off that horse now. So when you are going to clean a pen, you want to do so with distilled water or cold water. I've never used hot water on my pens, and I don't know if that's like a thing, but I personally have never used hot water on my pens because the pieces are plastic and I don't want them to expand or contract. So I've only ever used cold, or I guess room temperature water. Also, when you're cleaning, you may want some tools. So here I have a flat-nosed syringe. This is really handy when it comes to cleaning out the converters or cartridges. I also have a very long cotton swab here. I think the long ones are best, especially for pen cleaning, because you can get all the way in the bottom of the barrels, the caps, and you're not worrying about getting, your fingers all smashed up in the lid. So here, I'll use this one as an example. My pen's gonna roll away because my desk isn't level. Here, I can hold this all the way back here and make sure I'm cleaning really well the inside of the cap if I have any stuck on ink or anything that's really stubborn in there. Or I could use a shorter one, which is about this tall, and my fingers are right at the edge. Either way it works. I just like the longer ones better because they're a bit more ergonomically friendly for me, I guess. Also, you may want to use a toothbrush. So this is what I like to use for my very stubborn shimmery inks. So I don't think I'm going to be able to show on camera actually cleaning a pen today with water and whatnot. So I will just show you guys what I plan to do with this very stubbornly shimmery feed here. So I have the feed and I have toothbrush, and I'm basically just going to gently run the toothbrush under water like this. Like brushing your teeth, I guess, but I'm brushing the feed very, very gently. You do want to use a very soft toothbrush for this. You want to use even a baby toothbrush. This is a free toothbrush from my dentist office. So I'm just very gently brushing away the shimmer, and underwater, this would be a lot more, I guess it would work a lot better because I'm just, dusting glitter off onto my desk right now. But this will help get any clogs out of the feed that you're experiencing if you're using glittery inks. Obviously, if you're not using glitter inks, don't worry about this part. But you may want to use a toothbrush for pigment inks as well, just because the pigments can get stuck in the feeds and may cause clogs over time. It's not as bad, I would say, as shimmer inks can get though. The other thing you may want to consider when you are cleaning a pen is if you have a very stubborn pigmented ink or saturated ink that is just taking over the pen, maybe even looking like it's staining your pen, you may want to invest in some pen flush. This one is by 𝗬𝗍. You do not need very much of this. I would say it's like 2 to 4 mils of pen flush and you're set. It's very light use. You don't need a whole lot of it to clean out a pen. And I would say that's only if you're having struggles getting the pen completely clean, which goes back to earlier when I was talking about if you have a pen and you haven't used it and it's full of ink and it's been that way for months, you may need to use some kind of pen flush to fully get all of the ink that's dried up in the pen out. You can also soak pieces of your pen. So if you have a very, I'd say clogged feed. So let's say this black plastic piece is so full of ink that when you hold it up to the light, you can see all of the ink kind of caked in between the fins of the feed. And you just know it's not going to be clean anytime soon. Just take a little cup of water, again, room temperature or cold, and just plop this in there and let it sit for about 24 hours. Come back, rinse it off, and see how it's doing. I don't think I would recommend soaking plastic pen pieces or pen pieces in general for longer than a day, just because you wouldn't want to cause any harm to the parts. May cause rusting, I think, in some pens, and each pen is a little bit individual with its materials, so you may have, some slight variation in success of what could be cleaned by soaking it. That's why I recommend the pen flush, because for sure the pen flush is going to get rid of any of those dried particles. If not with one flush or maybe 2 flushes, then third flush, third time's the charm kind of thing. I think that is a very basic overview of cleaning a fountain pen. Like I said, if you were to clean it, in a jar of water that I don't have here, it's like my hand's a jar of water. I'm sticking the nib and feed into the jar of water. You want it to be completely submerged, and you're going to turn the piston either in the converter or in the piston filler itself and flush it up and down until this runs clear. You could do that, or you can take the pen completely apart and clean it that way as well. Just take your time with it. There are lots of videos here on YouTube that showcase cleaning specific fountain pens if you have a specific pen that you are trying to figure out. Okay, now I want to talk a bit about pen maintenance, and this is really specific to piston filler pens, and that is you may have to take it apart at the back here and re-grease some of the parts so they turn a lot easier. So if you probably heard it, I don't know, between the 2 piston fillers I have here. So I have my 𝗬𝘗 Eco and then the 𝗬𝘁 419. I'm going to twist the 𝗬𝘗 Eco, and you can hear the way this turns. It's very quiet, it's very smooth, don't really have any issues with it stopping or starting in funny places. It's working perfectly fine. But this other pen I have here, the 𝗬𝘁 419, now let's listen to its piston. You can hear a bit more of a squeakiness in here. You can hear a bit more of like a, I would say tighter turns among the plastic inside, this may need some grease. So with that, I don't know if I'm going to be taking this pen apart on camera because I do want to clean it really well before I take it completely apart, but you would need something like a wrench here to get the back end apart, and then you would use something like this, which is a little tiny bottle of grease, to go ahead and grease a little bit of the pen. You do not want to put on a lot. It's like 1 or 2 drops and then test it. If you do too much, you can cause a problem where there's too much grease and then it becomes really gummy and it doesn't work that way. So it's better to start small and work your way up if you need to add more. But again, there are lots of videos out here, especially for 𝗬𝗏𝘗s, because they come with their own wrench and grease, of what you can do if you have that problem. As a beginner, I don't think you're going to be having this problem unless you're just mistreating your pens. But again, I want to include it in this video because it is a possibility of something you may need to do, but it's a bit more advanced. So I would definitely keep doing some research if you have to get to this point of maintenance. Okay, and then the last thing that I want to talk about is all about nibs. So let me zoom out a little bit. So when you get a fountain pen, usually you want to write with it right away, make sure everything's good, there's no issues with the nibs. So when you get a fountain pen and you're writing with it, if it feels like the pen itself is dragging on the paper, like if I'm writing and it just feels like I'm scratching nails on a chalkboard and it's so unpleasant, there is probably something wrong with your nib. And there's 2 things you can do when that situation happens. First thing, contact whoever you bought the pen from, whether it is a reseller, whether it is direct from the pen company. Just give them an email, shoot them a message and say, hey, I got this pen at this date, this blah, from this retailer or from you guys, order number, blah, 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 and it's not writing well. Can I get a replacement? What would you like me to do, etc. The other option, especially if you've gotten a pen secondhand, or if you maybe bought a vintage pen and you're trying to tune it a little bit to where the nib is flowing a little bit easier, is you can get something like this. So these tools here that I have are what I consider my fine-tuning nib tools. So I have some brass sheets here. You can cut them into little circles. You can use them as squares. I've seen lots of different ways to use these. You essentially want to put the brass sheet in between the tines of the nib, like right here, and drag it up and down or around the brass sheet until the flow is adequate for your needs. Go slow here. Again, minimalist is best. Start a little bit, write with it, see if it fixes the problem. Keep going a couple more times, and if it still hasn't fixed the problem, this is what I would recommend next, and that is to use a magnifying glass. So this is a, I think, 10x magnifier. I don't even know if the camera is going to work with this, but essentially you want to put this over your nib. Again, I don't think it's going to work with this camera. Oh, okay, maybe. And then some of these have a light, and you can see how the nib is doing up close and personal with one of these magnifying glasses. They're not super expensive. I don't even know where I got this one, and I only really use these if I'm truly having a horrible time with the nib. I don't mess with the nib unless I really am having the worst time and I can't get any information from my person that I bought it from. The other option, if you're wanting to kind of smooth the nib, is using something like, I think it's called micro mesh. Yeah, I have actually never used these. These are from 𝗬𝗏𝘗 pens. So I have a set of micro mesh and mylar papers here. So micro mesh is essentially super fine grit sandpaper. This is 12,000 grit. And if you wanted to kind of tune or smooth the tip of your nib, let's say it's really just the feedback is not hitting what you want, it's getting really scratchy and like it's too pencil-y, like for you want it to be smoother like butter, you would get your nib wet. First of all, you never want to put a dry nib on this, only have wet nibs, and you're slowly going to just do strokes like this until you get the smoothest you want. Again, very minimal amount here is necessary. Do like a few strokes, test with water on some paper and see if the feel is the same like if it's getting better or if you need to do some more work on it. You can do the same thing. Again, small strokes. You can even turn the nib on its side and do small strokes. You never, ever, ever want to press down really hard with this. You're just doing very slight movements. If you press down with this, you're likely going to change the size of your nib. It is 12,000 grit paper. It's going to shave off little tiny pieces of the nib. That's what you're doing by smoothing it, essentially. With the Mylar paper, essentially you're doing the exact same thing. It's just on a much, much finer scale than the 12,000 grit. So you have two different ones here. You have 1 micron and 3 or 0.3 micron, and you can probably guess which one to use first. It's going to be the 1 and then the 3. Again, you're going to be just doing this as a very fine-tuned thing. I personally have never used either of these pieces. Again, I have been really fortunate with my nibs that I've gotten, but that is what you are meant to do with them. And if you wanted to fine-tune a nib, you're going to just take this and go again with water very, very smoothly. If you're afraid to work on your nibs as a beginner, that is okay. You can visit pen shows. You can contact people on the internet for nib meisters. They can have your pen, like you can ship your pen to them and they will work on it for you and ship it back to you. I just think this is a really great option if you want to start learning for yourself. I would highly recommend starting with really cheap pens like Jinhao 82s and get, different, I guess, nib consistencies that you're really, really happy with. I would not recommend taking your brand new Pilot Custom A23 18 karat gold nibbed pen to any of this. I would definitely recommend, if you're using a gold nibbed pen, to have a professional look at it. But if you're wanting to play around with like a beginner pen to see what you can do, I think that's kind of fun. Last thing I want to talk about is this bad boy here. This is a pen grip or a nib grip. So if I were struggling, let's say, to get this nib out and I knew that it's meant to come out, you can use a nib grip to gently pull. Again, gently pull, and this will remove the nib and the feed if both are meant to come out, or it will just remove the nib. I find this tool very, very handy when it comes to the 𝗦𝗵cie𝗺𝗍𝗵 pens. So this one here, and that's because the nib comes off, but the feed does not. So whenever I want to change my nib size, I just take this little grip section here, or this little grip here, gently grab the sides of the nib and pull. I'm not going to do that right now because there is ink in this pen. But whenever I want to change out the different nibs for my 𝗦𝗵cie𝗺𝗍𝗵, I just do that with this because it can get really slippery and these nibs are a little bit harder to grab. Okay, I think that's all I really want to chat about in terms of beginner pens and maintenance. Again, biggest advice here for a beginner is just go slow. Do research about specific pens if you're really curious about anything specific, and also to just have fun, because this is ultimately a fun hobby. It's meant to be a pleasant experience. It's not meant to be a chore. Having a fountain pen is, a joy. It's meant to be comfortable in the hand. It's meant to be, fun to write with. So yeah, cleaning them isn't necessarily fun, but it doesn't need to be a horrible experience. And it honestly is pretty quick when you are taking care of your pens regularly. Okay, if you think I missed anything about fountain pen maintenance for beginners, please leave it down in the comments. I've talked about this in most of my videos for this series. I would love for these types of videos to be a great reference point for anybody who's new to the hobby who wants to have more advice. So if you are a fountain pen user and you love your pens and you have maintenance tips for any of us, leave that down in the comments. But I think I'm gonna leave the video off here. Again, I want to thank you so much for watching, for joining me today. I hope you're taking great care of your fountain pens, and I also hope to see you in the next one.